Hi everyone, welcome to the 9th webinar of the Singers Laboratory webinar series. My name's Saide, my pronouns are she and her. Today we're going to discuss a few different ways in terms of how to go about selecting suitable songs for yourself, for your voice, musical background, or for the group that you're working with, like a choir. Before we begin, let's have a moment of mindfulness together so that we could get into a headspace to really focus on the learning process. You can have a seat. If it feels comfortable, you can close your eyes, and we're just going to focus on our breathing for a little bit. Let's notice the quality of the breath. Is it shallow? Is it deep? Is it relaxing? Is it quick or slow? We're just noticing for now. We're not trying to change anything yet. Let's see if you can invite a deep, relaxing breathing process. The same kind of a breath that we need for singing. You can breathe through your nose and the mouth. Tune into the body. If there is any spots that are a little bit tense, see if you can release it and soften into it with every exhalation. If there are a lot of thoughts coming your way, that's still okay. You can start counting your breaths in your mind. You can count 1 on the inhale and 2 on the exhale. Let's try that for a few breaths. As you're tuning into the breath and the body, let's go ahead and pick an intention for today's session, or for today in general, something that you'd like to focus on for the rest of the day. It could be anything big or small. You could set the intention of being present, of staying focused, of having fun, learning new things, anything that you think is going to serve you well. Pick one intention. With that intention in mind, blink your eyes open and we'll begin. I've included a few elements here in terms of order of the presentation. We'll go through a few essential things that I think we need to keep in mind when talking about improving our quality of singing. That list could be very, very long, of course, but I've tried to focus on a few things only. Then I'll get into specific suggestions and guidelines that I would recommend in terms of how to approach picking songs. And finally, some do's and don'ts. So normally when we think of improving our singing quality, we think of singing songs as a way of doing that. Now I want you to brainstorm and think about what happens if we only sing songs as a way of improving our singing. What happens if we just sing through songs and expect that our technique improves, our diction improves, our expressivity improves? What happens if we just sing songs rather than doing other things? Feel free to write down your comments for me below. What happens if you only sing songs as a way of improving your singing? Yes, Laura's saying maybe we practice our mistakes a little. For sure. So there is a chance of having mistakes and continuously repeating that. Rather than repeating the right thing, we would repeat our mistakes maybe, or some habits that don't really serve us in singing. What else would happen? We might sing in the wrong key, yes, so again, mistakes repeat. Now, if we just sing a song that we kind of like, I would say that that process might be a little bit mindless. It's not a very mindful process, right? We might just sing along to a song It's not an active process of planning, rehearsing, thinking about things. So there is a possibility of actually nothing improving. And that's often what happens. A lot of people might say, well, I've been working on this song for months and I'm not improving at all. I'm not seeing any more confidence. I'm not seeing better support. I'm not seeing better vocal quality. It's because the process is not mindful. Yes, we don't stretch our skills. So I would recommend that we start thinking about disassembling the idea of singing. Some people say dissect singing, but I like the idea of disassembling it. So there are many different elements for singing that maybe we need to focus on separately before we combine all of them together and apply it to a song. So applying skills to a song for me would be a last step. Rather, we need to start by little elements. So first, you could focus on just a technical element. Instructors have technical exercises. You could yourself invent specific warm-ups or exercises that you want to improve a specific aspect. They are geared towards specific things. So for example, it could be an exercise where you could practice how to sing leaps and jumps in a song well. It might be a technical exercise for singing high notes lightly. So they're normally geared towards one thing. So that's why it's very focused. You can focus on emotional expressivity alone. So feeling emotions and expressing them is something that also needs to be planned and rehearsed. Some of us might be more attuned with our emotions and some of us may not be, but the repertoire we usually deal with is extremely complex in terms of analyzing the psychological journey of a character. It's not just sad and happy and angry. Oftentimes there is more complex things come into play, like how would you showcase nostalgia? How would you showcase lack of belonging? There is so many layers. Because of that, emotional expressivity needs planning as well. You need to spend a lot of time with the text of a song. I mentioned exploration and experimentation. That's an essential element. If you give yourself a song right away, that process might be a little bit limited. You're giving yourself a framework to work from rather than allowing yourself to experiment. Ask yourself, I wonder what happens if I do X. I wonder how I'll feel if I sing this way. So experiment. Lyric diction is another important one. Basically, it means how to sing, pronounce things properly for the purpose of singing when it comes to understanding of languages. And finally, a lot of musicality and musical elements that we need to think about. So we need to practice all these elements that I mentioned separately and alone and a little bit in isolation before we can combine them and apply them to a song. The final product, that final step is the song when it all comes together. Now, how do we know if a song is suitable for us? We need to look at the song from different perspectives. So I'm trying to give you kind of like a to-do list, like a list that you could tick off and go through. So you need to look at a song from a musical standpoint, from a linguistic standpoint, technical, emotional, and contextual. These are just a few things that I mentioned, but you could of course add to it. If you have more ideas, let me know. First, before we can determine what level is suitable for us, we need to describe what our level is to begin with. So most of us might have a general idea of where we stand in terms of our level and our comfort, but we need to write it down and really think about it mindfully. The purpose of this exercise is to bring awareness to your level of musicality and what you need to do in your path of learning and what you need to do to make sure that journey of learning continues. It creates a mindful process of practice and it also helps you trace your improvement and really improve. So you can keep these things in mind. Answer the following questions or fill in the blanks. I am able to figure out the following musical elements. In terms of music theory, what do you think you're able to figure out with a lot of comfort? Is it rhythms? Is it the key, dynamics, pitches, everything that is more theoretical maybe about a piece of music? How many things can you figure out and be comfortable with? List them here. The next one, I'm comfortable singing in the following languages. List the languages you've sung in or you speak in, and you think you have a relative understanding of on how to approach them. And finally, list the elements that are challenging for you in singing. I've mentioned a few things. High notes, sustaining the right pitches, singing long phrases, using support, core muscles, singing at a comfortable volume, projecting, singing without a strain. Which one of these you find challenging when you sing? Feel free to add to this list. Answering these 3 questions, let's say, will help you construct your description of your level of expertise in the art of singing. Then after you create that working description, feel free to give yourself a mark on a scale. Are you very comfortable with something? Are you somewhat comfortable? Are you not comfortable at all? Give yourself this a scale so that you could see right in front of you, very realistically, where you stand in terms of your musical knowledge. After you have created your description of where you truly think you stand in your journey, then it's time to look at the songs and see which ones are suitable for you. So I included a note here that a lot of times we might listen to a recording and think, oh, that's perfect for me. But I would recommend that you also look at the score, because sometimes it's very deceiving, right? We listen to a recording, the singer is doing a great job, and we think it might be simple, but it might be more complicated than we think, and maybe not completely suitable. So listen to recordings and look at the scores as much as possible. Ask an instructor or a conductor to help you in this process. So when looking at the music, I've created a checklist here that you could go through. Look at the length of the song. Sometimes our favorite songs might be 12 minutes long, but that might not be our stamina yet for performance at a high level. Look at the range of the song. What is the lowest and highest notes in the music? And if it doesn't sit well in your voice, that's not the end of the world. Start looking at different editions, different transposed versions, to see if you could find one that the range is suitable for you, the lowest and the highest notes. Look at the tonality. Sometimes you might sing more contemporary music. It might be different. If you grew up with Western classical music, you might find a specific tonality is easier to sing. If you grew up with Middle Eastern music and quarter tones, maybe you'll find modal music easier actually. Look at the rhythms, look at phrases. Are there a lot of long phrases that you're expected to have really great breath control to sing? Are there very short, staccato, fast passages? I would also recommend looking at the voice with the accompanying parts. So maybe you like the vocal melody, but when you look at the piano, the, I don't know, chamber orchestra, other voices, it might become very complicated. Look at the words, what language it is in, how wordy it is normally. Is it fast? Is it slow? Look at dynamics. Are you expected to sing in one kind of a volume? Or are you expected to express the full range, which requires craftsmanship of the art form? A lot of times we might also fall into singing all songs at the same volume, but it's important to notice that you still want to give yourself a bit of a challenge, right? Pick things that you are able to a little bit grow more skills into them. And finally, special effects. What I mean by that is that a lot of contemporary music might have extra effects. They might ask the singer to whisper, to scream with support, to speak something. So keep track of all these special effects as well. Now we're going to look at the song from a linguistic perspective. Notice what languages you're already comfortable with. If the song is in a language that you're not comfortable with, that's okay. Research and see if there are resources to learn that language from a singer's perspective. So see if there are lyric diction resources telling you how to pronounce, allowing you to maybe hear a recording of how something should be pronounced. If that also doesn't exist for that particular language, consider connecting with the community that that song is coming from. For example, if you want to sing a song in Farsi, consider connecting to a person who maybe speaks Farsi as their first language, or speaks Yiddish or Hebrew. Although speaking and singing languages are different in many different aspects, just listening to their understanding and their way of pronunciation would help tons. And finally, keep track of your familiarity level. So you don't need to be an expert in a language. Sometimes some people tell me, I want to sing a song in French, but I don't speak French. I don't have a good understanding. Sometimes in the city that I'm in, like Ottawa, you can hear French. You can hear French songs. You can hear French radio. So whatever level of familiarity you have, that still counts. Keep a note of that. And the goal is to basically start from the familiar and add on familiar elements very slowly, one at a time. But not being familiar with a language should not stop you from singing the song, right? You might just have to put more effort in finding resources and people to help you with that. Now we're going to look at the technical demand of the song. A lot of these overlap with the musical elements, but I included a few things that are more important. So the range and where the song sits in your voice. I'm not really a huge fan of labeling people like soprano, mezzo soprano, because a lot of times humans are anything but labels. We're anything but boxes that we put ourselves in. So I'm kind of against labeling singers, but rather just seeing where your voice sits most comfortably. Sometimes you might sing a song and say, oh, I think this sits a bit low for my comfort level. Then you can find maybe a transposed version that is higher. Wordiness of the song. Some songs are very quick, very fast. They require excellent articulation skills, breath management, support. Look at articulation markings. Is this a song that has a lot of accents maybe? A lot of staccato passages? Look at the phrases. Is this a song that you would need to sing very lyrical, legato, long phrases like in French repertoire? Or not? Maybe it's a bit easier. Look at dynamics. Look at leaps and jumps. That's something that could catch us off guard. Those are a bit challenging. And finally, look at the tempo of the song. Again, we sometimes get stuck in singing in the same tempo, the same speed. Feel free to explore a bit, maybe slower songs, faster songs. But if you go to the extremes, they would become very, very challenging. So maybe stay away from super extreme ranges, like too fast or too slow. Emotions. I put this here because I think, like singing, like musical expertise, we also need to develop our emotional expertise. Emotions are things that need to be planned and rehearsed, just like technique, you know? Some of us can access it faster, some of us it's harder, but it needs to be practiced. A lot of times songs have more than just one or two emotional elements. It's really important to spend time with a song and understand the entirety of the range of emotions that are portrayed and to work towards portraying them for a really rich, multifaceted performance. Look at if there is sudden changes. Look at dramatic cues. And finally, I want to mention that when it's about work on emotions, it's important to make sure you are psychologically safe. So if you're a conductor picking music for a group, it's important to understand that maybe some emotions or some stories might trigger trauma in some people. So that needs to be addressed, that everybody feels safe. Sometimes as an individual, you might not want to go there to explore a specific emotion for whatever reason, and that's okay too. So for emotion, it's important to make sure that we're psychologically safe. For context, so I had a whole webinar on the process of preparing to practice a song. I included a few notes here. For context, we need to research the composer, the poet, the history of the song, and then ask yourself, is this song appropriate for me? Are there problematic elements? If there are, how can you address them? Should you just toss the song away and never sing it? Or are there ways that you could adjust it, modify it, change it? Was the song written for a specific movement? Do you need to have knowledge of that movement? Do you need to have a specific approach when singing this song in the context of the people who created it? For, respect to the creators of songs. And finally, I also wanted to mention that a lot of times we can't just take songs or pay for a song and think that's okay to sing it. A lot of times when you approach songs from different cultures, even if they're classically written, it's important to connect with the composer or the community that the song came from and really collaborate with them in what they think is the most appropriate way. Sometimes, in addition to money, there is other processes and protocols in place. If you have worked with indigenous communities, you might have noticed that there is tobacco offering. There is this real connection in making sure everything's treated with respect, that the song isn't just taken. These things are very important to keep in mind. Connect to the community and ask them what they think is the best way, or if they think the song is even suitable for you to sing. At the end of the day, you want to look for songs that are challenging in a way that they inspire, not in a way that they dishearten. So we always want some challenge, right? To move and to grow beyond our comfort zone. But how much challenge is the space that you would negotiate? We want inspiration at the end of all of our learning. A few do's and don'ts here. So do select clear goals, monthly goals. In one of my webinars in previous months, I talked about goal setting. You need to select very specific goals. What are you looking to get out of a singing lesson, a song, a rehearsal? Pick songs that help your goal. They need to feed into your goals and dreams. Think about incorporating your favorite songs in your learning process. Ask instructors for resources and help. And finally, look through reputable editions or publications. Sometimes we may know for more well-known music, like for Schubert, these editions are the most reputable or the ones that people use most often. But when it comes to maybe singing songs from local composers, living composers, composers from different countries and cultures, this might not be such an easy thing. It might be difficult to acquire. So it's very important to do your research and connect with the people who create the music. And it's actually, I'm all for looking for music that is not performed, introduce new music, introduce fun music, things that are innovative, they've never been heard before. A few don'ts. So I would not recommend picking songs just because of a personal interest, just because it's popular, or just because it has a particular theme and we want to include that theme in a concert. There needs to be many different aspects in it, like I mentioned, musical, technical, emotional, linguistic, before we pick a song. It's not recommended to pick a song just because it's a favorite, and a lot of times you might carry those bad habits with you, and then you would have to start from beginning, fixing bad habits, and then learning all over again. And finally, I would say don't download random versions off of internet. Make sure you do your research, find the edition that the composer wanted printed, wanted access, like wanted people to access. Look for it, make sure that you also contribute, compensate, and pay the people who create the songs. So after this webinar, in a few weeks, I'll send you an email with the recording of this webinar, some resources, as well as my social media. I post all updates and announcements on my website and Instagram, so feel free to follow me. And reach out if you have any questions, if you'd like to maybe deepen your understanding or learning of anything that I mentioned today, feel free to reach out. You're all eligible for a 30-minute lesson with me after attending a webinar as part of this series. So feel free to reach out if you'd like that set up. But this is the end of the webinar, and let me know if you have any questions or comments.